Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. Our guest of today is John, and he's the founder at Beckford Consulting. And yeah, John, why don't you tell a little bit more about yourself and what the company is doing?
Beckford Consulting, established 35 years now, which is quite surprising, really. After a first career in banking, where I'd specialised actually in looking at how organisations performed, a PhD in organisational cybernetics, and cybernetic thinking has underpinned the development of everything we've done in Beckford Consulting ever since. And that's been about how we use information in organisations to improve their performance. So we use information about performance to improve performance as the core of what we do. That's underpinned by sort of combination, it's very complex, a combination of understanding behavior, understanding attitudes, and understanding the sort of quantification of process and structure in organizations, and synthesizing that into a picture of what I would call an adaptive complex system, so that the organization remains stable by being dynamic.
Very nice. And out of all the companies you are serving, what do you feel from your own experience? I mean, you're in it for 35 years. I'm 29 myself, so 6 years before I even exist, you were in this space, which is amazing. I don't talk to a lot of founders who have so much experience in their own business. It's pretty rare. Um, what do you see from your own experience? What are some of the biggest challenges you have faced towards growing the company, towards where it is today, and how did you solve those challenges?
Well, we're kind of a tiny company, and that's deliberate. We did grow, and then we shrunk back again, and quite consciously making that decision. Challenge with what we do is that it requires a lot of specialist knowledge, and it requires a lot of specialist time. And so trying to scale up a consulting business which is based on a strong research underpinning, and it is everything we do is as fundamental basics in theory, is very difficult. It's not something that most clients particularly want to pay for. A lot of clients want short-term quick answers, and the cybernetics was to understand not just what they could do in the short term, but what they need to do for the long term to ensure their own survival. So we've had to develop an approach which is rooted in the use of associates and expertise. So basically bringing in expert associates in particular fields when we need them to complement a very small core team. That has the huge advantage for a small business of making best use of capital. So we're not using working capital to pay wages for people that aren't able to work, because the clients we have at the particular moment don't require their skills. So we bring people in on very much a sort of a network basis, and of course they're free to go off and work with other people. The sort of huge advantage of that is that the ideas that we have at the core of Beckford Consulting, of course, get propagated out into other organizations in a very rich way through that network of communication and other companies that they work with.
Very nice. And like what you're saying, the companies you kind of help out with, they want the kind of a short-term fix. They need something right now. And
It is, and it's challenging, because often the right thing to do is the long-term thing to do. So you're having to synthesize what looks like you must do these things now in order to remain in business. However, you must do these things longer term in order to remain in business. And sometimes there's a tension between those two things. There's an organizing framework that was come up with a chum of mine, a chap called Dr. Peter Dudley, like me, a cybernetician. And he came up as part of his research with the thing that we call the trialogue. And I can send you a diagram after the video if you sort of drop in. The trialogue says there are three things that any organization must do in order to survive. And number one is it must do things, whatever its current activity is, it must do that as well as it can. It must also do right things. There's actually got to think about what are the things that cause it to continue to exist. And of course, to unlock the tension between those two, it has to understand what it means by rightness. So you're doing right things. Defining rightness is what Peter calls the trialogue, and that's how the core of long-term survivability for the organization. And that notion of rightness, of purpose, is again, it comes to the core of the sort of cybernetic thinking. Is what are we trying to achieve, and why are we trying to achieve it? And that's the bit where, when you're talking to clients, talking to potential clients, you have to get inside their heads about what they think they're trying to do. And a lot of it well, probably increasingly so, is about short-term profitability. I know, I was a banker, I know that profitability is important, but it's short-term profitability at the expense of long-term survival is not great.
Yeah, completely get what you're saying. Like, hey, like you get from your own experience having these conversations, they were often focused on the short-term profitability, but where you see usually like a lot of things, people who are like thinking about the short-term profitability, it might make more sense to not just look at this kind of short-term period, actually like, open up your scope towards like, hey, where do we want to go as a company maybe in the next couple of years?
Absolutely. I think that it was W. Edwards Deming, who was a great quality guru of the sort of 50s to the 80s, who said, yeah, anybody can make more money this quarter. You just ship product regardless of the quality, and that's it. And you get cash into the till. So really understanding, and I mean really understanding what it means to be viable, what it means for the organization to balance the profitability against the environmental, against the human factors of or social factors, if you like, of survivability. And how do you tread the path between those three things? And that's done by understanding performance in a very rich way, and by creating the tools that help you to understand that performance and translate them into managerial action.
Very nice. And talking about that, like, how are you acquiring new customers at the moment?
Through the network, very simply. Given what we're trying to do, and given the nature of the problems, there are lots and lots of good consultancies out there that can do and will do productivity improvement, HR change, simple change programs, even quite big change programs. But yeah, for me, they're not terribly interesting problems because they're problems that have been solved, and all you're doing is applying a well understood solution to the problem. I'm interested in the problems that are ill-defined, where sometimes they don't even know they've got a problem, and you're trying to tease out from a complex conversation what's really going on inside the organization and how you can. I always struggle with this one. I want clients to solve their own problems, and I see my job as helping them to articulate the problem in a way that enables them to solve it, and throwing into the mix some ingredients, some insights that myself and my colleagues have that maybe they don't, to help them to solve their own problem. And that I wouldn't say it's unique, it's certainly rare, that when I walk away, I almost want them to kind of say, well, why was he here? Look at what we've achieved. What was he doing here all that time? Because actually they own the problem, they own the solution, they've implemented it. Because actually that's the only way that the solution will be sustainable. If everybody is turning around saying, Beckford told us to do this, and Beckford told us to do that, and Beckford told us to do this third thing, then it belongs to me. And of course, as soon as I turn my back, they will revert, not unreasonably, to the ways they've always done it. And so we have to work inside the organization with people, not for people, and alongside people to make the solutions happen.
Got this famous quote, which I heard many times, like, if you want to learn something to someone, if it's a business, even an individual, don't just give them fish. You want to teach them how to fish so they can kind of catch their own fish. It's kind of what you're saying.
Absolutely. So as a child growing up, I was taught to understand and solve problems. I wasn't taught answers. I was taught techniques for understanding problems and how to solve them. And that's the thing that we kind of need to pass on. So are our clients asking themselves the right question? Are they asking their market the right question? So how do we help them think about what might be better questions? Is a sort of takes us a long way towards, if you're asking better questions, you're maybe going to get better or certainly going to get different
Yeah.
answers. And there's a sort of bureaucratic philosophy. There's a Max Weber, 1923, whatever it was, sort of bureaucracy theory. And most of our modern large-scale organizations are structured around the sort of kind of bureaucratic model of organization. Everything in its place, every office, everybody has an office, everybody has a role and a structure, and so on. And that's massively useful. Don't get me wrong. It is massively useful. We couldn't do what we're doing now without that facility. But boy, does it get in the way, because it tries to formalize all the communication through the hierarchical channels, through the power structures that it necessarily creates, and that actually inhibits effective human communication. So we channel things up, and people literally put their fingers in there and say, "Don't tell me that. I don't want to hear it," or "That's outside your remit. You can't comment on it." So you have somebody who's right, who knows what's going on, but actually is prevented from sharing their knowledge. So we have to find a way again of blending the necessary and actually critical hierarchical structure. Power structures are legitimate. We have to accept that power structures are legitimate, ownership structures are legitimate. We have to be able to blend that with this sort of conversation, let's call it, between the people in the organization that give you life. And how do you sort of blend those two things together? So, and that's why long term is what has to happen. I work with one organization, is very long term in its thinking. So when it recruits new people, it takes 2 to 3 years before they join the organization in a formal sense. And then it will take another 6 to 7 years before they are fully formed, pledged members of the organization. 7 to 10 years to become, and that they are a very purpose driven organization. They lose people along the way because of that. Big, you either, because you're joining for life, you either fit or you don't. And it's really, really important to understand that before you join in. Whereas people joining conventional organizations, it's that they're normally somebody is recruiting to fit a post that they think exists, to fit a set of behaviors, a set of skills that go into, we've got a gap in marketing, we've got a gap in finance, and we need somebody who can do this, rather than thinking about the fit of that person to the community, the organization over time.
And then talking about the future, what are some of the goals you're having with Beckford Consulting in, let's say, the next 6 to 12 months from now?
To survive in the UK economy will be an achievement in itself. What we're trying to do at the moment is we're doing some prototyping in the AI space, and we've always done software prototyping, working with the university to do that, particularly around the challenge of detecting and understanding bias in processes. And particularly we're experimenting with a process in people selection, which is kind of driven with bias. So that's kind of one interesting place to play. We're looking at challenges of productivity and reframing the productivity argument in a kind of very, very different way, because the understanding of productivity is poor. There's an awful lot of talk about efficiency. There's very little talk about effectiveness. So measuring productivity in terms of effectiveness as opposed to efficiency is a bit of a change. And obviously working then with people on house building. House building is a major challenge in the UK, and I'm working with an MMC, modern methods of construction provider, trying to break into a different market and overcome the resistances that exist in that market to changing from traditional to modern methods is a sort of huge problem, because the whole structure of an industry is reflected in the traditional methods of house building. And so the employment models, the pension models, the finance models are all locked into this very traditional way of sticking bricks together in muddy fields. And when you start to talk about building houses in a factory, the delivery mechanism is different, the skills are different, the financial profile is different. So it's a kind of huge sea change. So we're working on that a lot at the moment. And that again is about how do you get productivity not into a factory, but into a system? How do you get productivity at the system level as opposed to the unit of output level? And that's kind of different scale of problem. It's exciting. It may or may not work, to be honest, but it's one to go and play with.
Very nice. And it's like, that's the reason, right? Like, it's all about taking action. Sometimes it might not, you might go into an avenue and it might not work out, but then you've tried it, right? And you don't have this
And that,
kind.
and that's what, that sort of keeps life exciting. I mean, that's why, after 35 years, I'm still working. I'm still enjoying what I'm doing, because I set out to find, I get bored very quickly. So I set out to find interesting challenges to work on, rather than grinding out the same solution to the same problem all the time. So we're always on that experimental leading edge with the work that we're doing, and we need clients that are also wanting to be at that leading edge, or frankly, sometimes they're in such a crisis that they're desperate for help. And there's quite a lot of challenged organisations out there at the moment, but it requires leaders to be. And I've said this to many of them over the years. Leaders need to be brave. They need to be courageous, not just in the decisions they make, but actually in confronting the scale of the problem that they're dealing with. Quite often, it's again, it's back to the short termism. We can drag a bit more cash in, we can push a bit more product out through the door, we can make it look better. So we can ameliorate the symptoms, but we're not actually addressing the disease. Talking to people about getting to the root cause of the challenges to their organizations can be difficult for them.
And then John, talking about the company, what are some of the ways they can, for the people who are listening to this podcast, they're like, hey, I want to connect more with John, I want to connect more with Beckford Consulting. What are some of the ways how they can do that?
Very easy. I have a telephone. It's not in the office at the moment, so it doesn't disturb this call. But get on the website. The website is there. It's very easy to contact us through that. I'm moderately well known in the UK anyway, so there's something like 5,000 people have my phone number, which is really kind of weird. The website is the easiest way. It also gives people the opportunity to sort of scan through some of the materials, the work we've been doing over the years, and actually there are 6 or 7 videos on the website as well, which are all about the ideas of cybernetics and how we apply them to organizations. So there's quite and that's some material that's just free, and people could just sort of dig into that and find out for themselves. And if they still think it's worthwhile, then I'm easy enough to find on things like LinkedIn. It's dead easy.
Thank you so much, John, for being on the podcast, sharing about the company, sharing your own journey. For the people who are listening to this podcast, I'm going to make sure to put the links of John and the company down below so you can easily find it. For everyone who was watching, thanks for tuning in, and see you all in the next episode. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Joey.